My boyfriend's sister said she ruled the house and I was only the girlfriend there. She lost her mind when we got engaged. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when you realize the person you love is unwittingly enabling a monster right under their own roof? What if that monster wasn't some stranger, but his own sister, and she was dead set on destroying your future, piece by agonizing piece? Because that's exactly what happened to me, and the fight to reclaim our lives nearly broke us both. I started dating Owen 2 years ago. We met at a friend's barbecue, and it was one of those instant connections. We talked for 3 hours straight about everything and nothing. He asked me out the very next day, and we've been inseparable ever since. Owen is genuinely one of the kindest, most hardworking men I've ever met. He treats me better than anyone ever has. He even owns his own 3-bedroom house, something he worked overtime for years to achieve, and he's incredibly proud of it. The only complication? His sister, Noreen. She moved in with Owen 5 years ago after her divorce, supposedly for a few months, just until she got back on her feet. 5 years later, she was still there. And she wasn't just staying, she was living. No rent, no utilities, and only buying groceries she personally liked. Owen, being Owen, let her stay because she's his sister, and he felt this deep, aching guilt about her marriage falling apart. I understood that at first. Family is important, and I genuinely didn't want to come between them. But Noreen made it abundantly clear, from day one, that she saw me as a threat. The first time I ever stayed over at Owen's house, she watched me like I was a burglar casing the place. Her eyes followed my every move. The questions started almost immediately. How long had I been dating her brother? What did I do for work? How much did I make? Did I have my own place, or was I looking to move in with someone? Every single question felt like an interrogation. And the next morning, as I was leaving, she pulled Owen aside and told him I seemed nice, but something about me felt off. He told me later, thinking it was funny. I didn't laugh. I just felt this cold knot in my stomach. Over the next year, Noreen's behavior escalated. Oh, it escalated all right. I'd clean the house, and she'd subtly rearrange things. If Owen and I made dinner plans, she'd cook some elaborate meal, guilt-tripping him into staying home. She interrupted us constantly, movies, conversations, you name it. She'd knock on his bedroom door at random hours with questions that absolutely could have waited until morning. It was like she was constantly reminding me, I live here too. This is my house. After 18 months, Owen asked me to move in. I was thrilled until I realized Noreen wasn't going anywhere. He said she just needed a little more time, that she was almost ready to get her own place, and that I needed to be patient because she was family. I loved him, I really did, and I believed things would work out. So I agreed. The day I brought my first box of belongings to the house, Noreen pulled me aside. Owen was outside, grabbing more boxes from my car. She stood in front of me in the hallway, her voice a quiet, menacing whisper, so only I could hear. This is my house, she hissed. I've been here for 5 years. You're just the girlfriend. She said Owen might own the property, but she ran the household. You can stay in his bedroom, she continued, but the rest of the house is my territory. If you try to change anything or push me out, I will make your life miserable. Then she smiled, a sweet, innocent smile, as if she'd just offered me a cup of tea and walked away. I stood there, a box of books heavy in my arms, my heart pounding, completely stunned. Did that just really happen? The next 6 months were exactly what Noreen had promised, miserable. She criticized everything I did. Too much hot water. My cooking smelled up the kitchen. She rearranged my groceries, so I couldn't find anything. Every evening, she commandeered the living room TV and refused to share. She told Owen I was messy, even though I cleaned constantly, and rude to her, even though I barely spoke to her. She'd cry to him about feeling pushed out of her own home, even though no one was pushing her anywhere. Owen always defended me privately, saying she was sensitive, still recovering from her divorce, that I needed to give her grace. I gave her 6 months of grace. Then I stopped. I started reclaiming my space. Noreen had spread her belongings everywhere, the cat marking territory. I calmly gathered everything of hers from the common areas and neatly placed it in her bedroom. When she complained, I told Owen I was just organizing. He thought it was reasonable. She couldn't argue without admitting she'd taken over rooms that weren't hers. Then I started cooking dinner every night. Noreen used to cook whenever she wanted Owen's attention, but now I got there first. I'd make his favorite meals, ready for him when he got home. She tried to compete, but Owen said he felt bad eating twice. So she ate her elaborate meals alone while we ate together. Next, I took over household management. I created a chore schedule, a bright, cheerful thing posted right on the fridge. And guess what? Noreen was on it. After all, she lived there rent-free. She could contribute something. She threw an absolute fit, screaming that I had no right to assign her tasks. I told Owen it was only fair since I was contributing more than her, despite moving in 5 years later. He actually agreed. He told Noreen she needed to help out. That was the first time he ever set a boundary with her. Noreen started slipping. She couldn't handle having rules. She skipped her assigned chores, and I'd calmly point out. She'd make passive-aggressive comments, and I'd respond with aggressive politeness. She tried to get Owen alone to complain about me, but I made sure we spent most of our time together. I wasn't fighting with her. I was just taking up the space she'd assumed was hers forever. The breaking point came when Owen mentioned we'd been talking about getting engaged. We were sitting on his bed, relaxed, talking about timelines and what kind of ring I might like. Owen was smiling, a genuine, easy smile he rarely had when his sister was home. Then I heard Noreen's footsteps stop dead in the hallway. Without knocking, she pushed the door open. Her face went completely white, like all the blood had drained out. Then a terrifying flush of red flooded her cheeks and neck. She just stood there, breathing hard, staring at us. Owen started to say something, but she cut him off, storming into the living room. We followed her, because the alternative was letting her destroy something. She spun around, pointed a finger directly at me, and shrieked that getting engaged would be the biggest mistake of Owen's life. She said I was obviously just using him for his house. Owen tried to calm her down, but she just screamed louder. "You've already pushed me out of my own home," she wailed. "Now you're trying to steal my brother completely." Owen kept saying her name, a quiet, almost pleading tone, like he was trying to talk down a wild animal. Noreen ignored him, yelling about how I'd ruined everything, turned him against his family. I stood there, utterly silent, because I knew anything I said would only make it worse. Eventually, she ran out of steam and locked herself in her bedroom. Owen looked at me, a helpless, broken expression on his face. I just told him we'd talk about it tomorrow, and went to bed. My mind was racing. The next 3 days were worse than anything Noreen had done before. 2 a.m. b.m. Loud, terrible pop music blasting from her room, shaking the walls, just as I'd finally drift to sleep. Owen would go to her door, ask her to turn it down. "I can't sleep," she'd whine. "I need the music to relax." The second night, I woke up at 6 a.m. for work, went to shower, and ice cold. She'd used all the hot water. When I came out, Noreen was in the kitchen, making coffee, acting like nothing was wrong. "Sleep well?" she asked with a sickeningly sweet smile. "Fine," I said, and left for work without breakfast. That afternoon, Owen called me. Noreen had told him I was saying cruel things about his family. He said he knew it wasn't true, but he wanted to check in. I asked what specifically I was supposed to have said. He got quiet. He admitted Noreen wouldn't give details. She just cried and said I was mean to her when he wasn't around. That's when I started keeping notes on my phone. Time the music started and stopped, when the hot water ran out, and when I saw Noreen afterward. Owen's reports of her complaints. I didn't know exactly what I was documenting, but I knew, deep down, I'd need proof. 2 weeks later, Owen took me to our favorite Italian place downtown, where we'd had our third date. He seemed nervous during dinner, barely touched his pasta. When the waiter cleared our plates, Owen reached across the table and took my hand. He told me he loved me, wanted to spend his life with me, and then he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was his grandmother's ring, a simple gold band with 3 small diamonds. I said yes before he even finished asking. There was no way Noreen's manipulation was going to control our relationship. We were both so happy, so excited, talking about telling people about long or short engagements. But that familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, thinking about what came next. We drove home, holding hands, making plans. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw her, Noreen, standing at the living room window, watching us. The curtain was pulled back, her arms crossed. Owen saw her too, and his smile faded a little. I squeezed his hand. "It'll be okay," I whispered, though I didn't entirely believe it myself. Owen wanted to tell Noreen right away. He said it wasn't fair to keep it from her. I suggested waiting until morning, but he insisted. He asked her to sit down in the living room. I sat on the couch next to Owen. Noreen took the chair across from us. Owen told her we were engaged. For a second, Noreen just stared. Then she started crying. Not quiet tears, but huge, sobbing gasps like she couldn't breathe. She said Owen was abandoning her, just like her ex-husband did. She said I'd turned him against his own family. She had nowhere to go, she sobbed, because she couldn't afford to live alone. Owen looked devastated. He moved to sit next to her, put his arm around her. He told her nothing had to change immediately, that she could stay as long as she needed. My stomach dropped when he said that. I knew with absolute certainty we couldn't keep living like this. Noreen kept crying, saying she didn't know what she was going to do. Owen kept reassuring her, promising things would work out. I sat there, watching him comfort her, feeling completely and utterly alone. After an hour, Noreen finally went to her room. Owen looked utterly exhausted. I told him I was going to bed and left him sitting there in the dark. I waited until I heard Noreen's door lock before I went back to the living room. Owen was still on the couch, staring at nothing. I sat down and told him we needed to have a serious conversation. He nodded but wouldn't look at me. I explained as calmly as I could that I wasn't moving forward with wedding planning while his sister lived here rent-free and treated me like an intruder. This was supposed to be our home, and I didn't feel welcome in it. Owen got defensive. Noreen was going through a hard time, he said. I needed to be more understanding. How long, Owen? I asked. How long am I supposed to wait? He didn't have an answer. You've been avoiding this confrontation for years, I said, and it's finally caught up to you. I could see it in his eyes. He knew I was right, even if he hated to admit it. He asked what I wanted him to do. I told him he needed to set a timeline for Noreen to move out, and actually stick to it this time. He said he'd think about it. Thinking isn't enough anymore, I told him and went to bed. The following week, we started looking at wedding venues online. I'd bookmarked a few places, and Owen seemed excited about a barn venue an hour away. We scheduled a video tour for Saturday morning. Friday night, Noreen announced she was having the bathroom tiles replaced, starting at 8 a.m. Saturday. Owen asked if she could reschedule. The contractor is only available this weekend, she insisted, and I've been planning it for weeks. I knew she was lying, but I didn't say anything. Saturday morning, we took the video call in Owen's car in the driveway because the hammering inside was too loud. The venue coordinator kept asking if everything was okay. After that, Noreen inserted herself into every decision. She'd walk by while we looked at venues, commenting they looked too expensive. She told Owen's spring weddings were cursed because her marriage fell apart in April. She scheduled loud projects during every single video tour we booked. Photographers? Overpriced. Catering? Nobody will come if you don't serve her mother's recipes, she'd sneer. I stopped arguing. I just started writing everything down. A detailed log. Dates, times, exact words, and actions. Owen needed to see the pattern in writing because he couldn't see it happening in real time. 3 weeks into our engagement, my friend Becca came over for coffee. Noreen was at work, or wherever she went during the day. Becca casually mentioned running into Noreen at the grocery store. She was driving a new car, Becca said, something silver and expensive looking. My heart pounded. When was this? I asked. 2 days ago, she said. I knew Noreen had told Owen she couldn't afford a car and had to borrow his for errands. After Becca left, I started digging. I found social media posts from Noreen's coworkers, tagging her at a downtown office building. I looked up the company. They were hiring for her position with a salary range that made my stomach turn. She was making more than Owen. I tracked her spending based on things I'd seen her buy and calculated she had to have significant savings. She'd been perfectly capable of affording her own place for at least 2 years. When Owen got home, I showed him everything. The job listings, the social media posts, my notes about her spending. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. He looked sick. I've been working overtime for months, he whispered, to cover household expenses. She'd been playing helpless, building a savings account, and driving a car nicer than his. Saturday morning, I woke to voices in the living room. I came out and found Owen's parents, Tabitha and Nolan, standing there with Noreen. They both looked at me with tight, disappointed expressions. Noreen had clearly been crying. Tabitha started talking about family bonds and being more understanding. She said Noreen was going through a difficult time, and I needed to show more compassion. Nolan chimed in, saying Owen had responsibilities to his sister that came before his relationship with me. They talked for about 5 minutes while I stood there in my pajamas, feeling completely invalidated. Then I held up one finger. Just a moment, I said, and went to get my folder. I'd printed everything out, organized it with tabs. I came back and calmly presented my documentation of Noreen's behavior. The log of sabotage attempts with dates and times. The evidence of her actual financial situation, including screenshots of her salary range and her expensive car. The timeline of escalating behavior from the day I moved in until now. Tabitha's expression changed as she read through the pages. Nolan got quiet, stopping looking at Noreen. I didn't say anything. I just let the evidence speak for itself. When they finished, Tabitha looked at Noreen. Is this true? Noreen started crying again, but it felt different this time. More desperate, less sad. She's twisting everything, she wailed, making me look bad. Nolan asked about the job and the car. That's private. Noreen snapped. None of your business. Tabitha gathered up the papers and told Owen they needed to talk as a family. I went back to the bedroom and left them to it. That night, Owen's best friend, Leonardo, came over for what Owen called a guy's night. I went to Becca's to give them space. When I came home around 11 p.m., they were both still sitting at the kitchen table, empty beer bottles lined up. Leonardo saw me. I should go, he said. Owen asked him to stay. Leonardo looked uncomfortable but sat back down. Then he told Owen something he said everyone in their friend group had known for years, but nobody knew how to bring up. He described how Noreen had destroyed Owen's previous 2 serious relationships through the exact same pattern. Manufacturing crises right when things got serious. Playing the victim, making Owen choose. Sabotaging plans, creating conflict until the women gave up. Leonardo said he'd watched it happen twice before I came along. He'd hoped Owen would see it this time, but Noreen's manipulation had gotten more sophisticated. Owen sat completely still, listening to his best friend explain that his sister had been controlling his personal life for years. Leonardo said everyone was afraid to say anything because they didn't want family drama, but watching it happen again with me was too much. Owen didn't say anything for a long time after Leonardo finished. Then he thanked him for telling the truth, and Leonardo left. Owen and I sat at the table in silence, the weight of years of deception hanging heavy in the air. The next morning, I laid everything out for Owen. My documentation, the financial evidence, Leonardo's account. I walked him through the pattern of Noreen deliberately sabotaging his relationships to keep him focused on her. How she'd been capable of independence for years, but chose to stay to maintain control. I showed him each piece of evidence, letting him draw his own conclusions. Owen looked physically ill. His hands were shaking, his face pale. He kept picking up different pages, reading them like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then something shifted in his expression. The guilt and confusion started changing into anger. Real anger. Not the frustrated helplessness I'd seen before. He said he needed to set a firm deadline for Noreen to move out, and he needed to enforce it this time, not let her manipulate him into backing down. I asked if he was sure. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said, his voice firm. "I've wasted years enabling behavior that hurt both of us. It's time to stop." That evening, Owen called Noreen into the living room. I stood next to him. I wanted her to see we were united. She came in looking annoyed, like we were interrupting her TV show, and sat down with her arms crossed. Owen took a deep breath. "Noreen," he said, "you have 60 days to find an apartment and move out." He offered to help with the first month's rent and security deposit, but the arrangement wasn't working anymore. It had to end. Noreen's face went from annoyed to shocked to furious in about 3 seconds. She stood up. "Is she behind this?" she spat, glaring at me. "Are you poisoning him against his own family?" Owen held firm. "This is my decision," he said, "and I've been thinking about it for a while now." Noreen switched tactics immediately. She started crying. "I can't believe my own brother is abandoning me, just like my ex-husband did," she wailed. "I have nowhere to go. I can't afford to live alone." Owen reminded her about her full-time job, about the savings account I'd discovered. Her tears stopped pretty fast when she realized he knew about her money. Then she got cold, really cold, in a way I'd never seen before. "You're choosing some woman you barely know over your own sister, who's been there for you your whole life," she snarled at Owen. "She'll leave you eventually, and then you'll regret pushing away the one person who actually loves you." Owen's hands were shaking, but he held firm. "The deadline is 60 days, he said, his voice barely a whisper, "and that is final." Noreen looked at me with pure hate in her eyes. "This isn't over," she promised. Then she walked out and slammed her bedroom door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Owen sank heavily onto the couch, head in his hands. I sat next to him, placing a hand on his back. "I'm proud of you," I told him, "even though I know how hard that was." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "I hope I'm doing the right thing," he choked out. "You absolutely are," I said, "and we'll get through this together." The next few weeks were tense, but Noreen seemed to accept the deadline. She started looking at apartments online, even went to see a few places. Owen started to relax a little, thinking maybe she understood. I, however, stayed cautious. I knew Noreen better than that by now. She was planning something. I just didn't know it yet. Then, with exactly 1 week left before the 60-day deadline, Noreen developed mysterious stomach pains. She came out of her room one morning, doubled over, groaning. Owen immediately wanted to take her to the emergency room. I watched her carefully and noticed she was peeking at Owen's reaction through her fingers while she groaned. They went to the hospital, spent 4 hours there. The doctors ran tests, found absolutely nothing wrong. Noreen came home with pain medication and a referral to a specialist. She told Owen she couldn't possibly focus on apartment hunting while dealing with this health crisis. She needed to concentrate on getting better first. Then she'd resume looking. Owen looked torn. I could see him starting to waver. That night, after Noreen went to bed, Owen suggested maybe we should give her more time, since she was sick. I looked at him. "No," I said. "This is manipulation, pure and simple." I pointed out how convenient it was that this mysterious illness showed up exactly 1 week before she had to leave. The doctors found nothing. She was peeking at him through her fingers. Owen wanted to believe me, but the guilt was eating at him. What if she really was sick and he forced her out anyway. What kind of brother would that make him? We are not resetting the deadline, I told him, for medical emergency that only shows up when deadlines approach. Noreen went to the emergency room 3 more times that week. Each visit lasted hours. Each time they found absolutely nothing wrong. Different pain meds, more referrals, but no actual diagnosis. She spent most of her time in her room, groaning loudly enough for us to hear. Owen was exhausted from worry and lack of sleep. I was exhausted from watching this obvious manipulation play out while Owen struggled with guilt. The deadline came and went. Noreen was still in the house, claiming she was too sick to move. Owen hadn't enforced it. I saw the pattern starting all over again. Crisis manufactured. Boundaries dissolved. Nothing changed. I couldn't do this anymore. I packed a bag one morning while Owen was at work and left it in my car. When he got home that evening, I told him. I'm moving out temporarily, I said. I'm staying with Becca until Noreen is actually gone from this house. Owen's face went pale. What do you mean? He asked. I explained as calmly as I could. I love you, I said, but I won't participate in this cycle anymore, where boundaries are set and then dissolve the moment Noreen manufactures a crisis. I watched you back down from the deadline you set, and I understand why, but I can't stay and watch it happen again and again. Owen looked panicked. You can't leave. We'll work this out together. I told him I wasn't breaking up with him, but I needed him to prove, through actions, that he was ready to prioritize our relationship. When Noreen is actually out of the house and staying out, I said I will come back. Until then, I'm with Becca. Owen started crying, begging me not to go. I hugged him. This is the only way you'll actually follow through, I whispered. Then I picked up my bag and left. I cried the whole drive to Becca's apartment. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, it was necessary. Becca opened her door and hugged me without saying anything. She'd been expecting this call for weeks. 2 days later, Owen showed up at Becca's apartment. I opened the door and he looked terrible. His eyes were red and puffy, like he'd been crying for hours. His clothes were wrinkled, like he'd slept in them. He looked exhausted, heartbroken, and determined, all at once. He told me he went through with enforcing the deadline, despite Noreen's protests. He'd told her she had 1 week to be out, or he would start formal eviction proceedings. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done, he said, but he finally understood that enabling Noreen had hurt both of them, prevented her from building her own independent life. I asked if he was sure. He nodded. Losing you, he choked out, made me realize I'd been choosing my sister's comfort over our future for too long. I'm done making that choice. I hugged him tight, feeling him shaking. I know this is incredibly hard, I whispered, and we'll get through the aftermath together. He held on to me, like I might disappear if he let go. We stood in Becca's doorway, holding each other while he cried. Becca gave us space, retreating to her room. Owen told me everything that had happened after I left. How Noreen's mysterious stomach pains disappeared the moment he told her the deadline was final. How she screamed at him for hours about what a terrible brother he was. How she called their parents and told them he was forcing her onto the streets while she was sick. And how he stood firm anyway, because he couldn't lose me. I told him I was proud of him, that this was the right thing, even though it felt awful. Noreen's final week in the house was a nightmare. She stopped pretending to be civil and went straight to destruction. I came back to help Owen deal with the situation, and immediately regretted it. The first thing I noticed was the smell of bleach coming from the laundry room. I opened the washing machine and found all my clothes soaked in pure bleach. Every single piece was ruined, covered in white spots and holes where the bleach had eaten through the fabric. Months of my wardrobe, destroyed in one spiteful act. I showed Owen and he looked sick. Then we found the scratches in the hardwood floor. Deep gouges carved into the master bedroom floor, like someone had taken a key or a knife and deliberately dragged it across the wood, over and over. The scratches formed words. She'd carved "traitor" into the floor in letters 2 feet tall. Owen stood there, staring at the damage to his house, the house he'd worked overtime for years to afford. The destruction went beyond my clothes and the floor. She'd smashed several dishes that belonged to Owen's grandmother, family pieces passed down for generations. She left them broken on the kitchen counter where we'd find them. She poured something sticky down the bathroom drain, clogging it completely, put holes in the walls of her bedroom, broke the lock on the back door. Every day brought new damage, new evidence of how much she hated us. Owen documented everything with photos. He walked through the house, taking pictures of each destroyed item, each damaged surface. I watched him photograph his grandmother's broken dishes and saw something change in his face. For the first time, he looked genuinely angry at his sister, rather than just disappointed or guilty. She'd crossed a line, he said, from manipulation into actual malicious destruction. This wasn't grief or fear anymore. This was deliberate cruelty, meant to hurt us as much as possible. The week ended and Noreen refused to leave. She locked herself in her room, saying she wasn't going anywhere. Owen stood outside her door. "You have 1 hour to start packing," he said, his voice steady, "or I'm calling the police." She screamed that he wouldn't dare. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. She opened the door then, looking at him like she didn't recognize him. He told her the deadline had passed, and she was trespassing in his house now. She said fine, and went back into her room, but she still didn't pack. Owen went to the county courthouse the next morning and filed formal eviction paperwork. The clerk explained the process would take at least another 30 days and cost several hundred in legal fees. Owen signed everything and paid the fees without hesitation. "I should have done this months ago," he said, instead of hoping Noreen would leave voluntarily. The clerk gave him a court date and instructions for serving Noreen with the eviction notice. Owen drove home and handed Noreen the papers himself. She read them and laughed. "You're really going to drag your own sister to court over this?" she sneered. "Yes," he said, "I am." "Their parents will be ashamed of you," she yelled. "They already know everything," he replied, "and they support my decision." That made her stop laughing. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Mom and Dad know about the destroyed property, the manipulation, and your refusal to leave." She went pale and locked herself back in her room. Over the next few days, Noreen started calling everyone she knew, her friends, distant relatives, posting vague messages on social media about betrayal and family bonds. She carefully left out every detail about her behavior, her financial capability, and the destruction she'd caused. Some people believed her version and sent Owen angry messages. Others asked for his side of the story and stopped talking to Noreen when they heard the truth. The family drama spread wider than our house, and I felt guilty about that, even though none of it was my fault. My phone rang one afternoon, and I saw Tabitha's name on the screen. Owen's mom. My stomach dropped. I assumed she was calling to yell at me for breaking up her family. I answered cautiously. She asked if we could meet for lunch, without Owen or Noreen present. I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant the next day. Tabitha looked older, tired and sad. She ordered coffee, then apologized. She was so sorry, she said, for initially taking Noreen's side, for not understanding what was really happening. She explained that she and Nolan had been enabling Noreen's dependence since her divorce, feeling guilty about her failed marriage. They thought they were helping her heal, but instead, they'd been preventing her from moving forward with her life. Watching Owen finally set boundaries, she said, had made them realize they needed to stop rescuing Noreen from the natural consequences of her choices. I didn't know what to say. I'd expected anger, blame, not an apology and self-awareness. Tabitha said she'd talked to Owen about everything, seen the photos of the destruction, and understood why the eviction was necessary. She and Nolan would help Noreen with moving costs, but they supported Owen's decision completely. She hoped I could forgive them for not seeing the situation clearly earlier. "There's nothing to forgive," I told her, truly meaning it. I'm just glad you understand now. We talked for over an hour about family dynamics, enabling, and how hard it is to see manipulation when it comes from someone you love. Tabitha hugged me before we left, thanking me for not giving up on Owen. He needed someone strong enough to help him break the cycle, she said. Nolan went to see Noreen a few days later. Owen told me about it afterward because Noreen called him screaming right after their dad left. Nolan sat down with Noreen in her room and told her he and Tabitha would help her with moving costs, but they supported Owen's decision completely. He said they'd watched her manipulate Owen for years, and they were ashamed they didn't intervene sooner to encourage her independence. Enabling her had seemed kind, but it had actually been cruel because it prevented her from building her own life. Noreen apparently told him he was choosing Owen over her, just like everyone else was. Nolan said he was choosing what was healthy for both his children, even if Noreen couldn't see that yet. He loved her, but he wouldn't help her avoid the consequences of her choices anymore. Noreen told him to get out, but Owen said something shifted in her expression when she realized her parents weren't taking her side this time. Her usual support system had collapsed. She was finally alone with the results of her own behavior. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 93 days after Owen first told Noreen she needed to leave. 3 months of manipulation, destruction, legal proceedings, and family conflict, all leading to this moment. Professional movers loaded Noreen's belongings into the truck while she supervised without looking at either of us. She'd found a 1-bedroom apartment across town, paid for partially by her parents, partially by her own savings that she'd finally admitted existed. The movers worked efficiently. Within 3 hours, everything she owned was packed and loaded. Noreen got in her car without saying goodbye. She pulled out of the driveway, and the moving truck followed her. Owen and I stood there, watching both vehicles disappear down the street. The house was finally ours. Just ours. No more Noreen watching our every move. No more manipulation, sabotage, or constant tension. Owen started crying. Not sad crying, not happy crying, but this complicated mix of relief, grief, and guilt all happening at once. He'd reclaimed his home, but lost his relationship with his sister in the process. He'd done the right thing, but it still hurt. I held him in the driveway while he processed everything. His whole body shook, and he cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry before. I didn't say anything, just held him and let him feel whatever he needed to feel. Eventually, he stopped shaking and pulled back. He looked at the house like he was seeing it for the first time. He said it felt different already, lighter somehow. That's what freedom feels like, I told him. The next 2 weeks were hard for Owen in ways I hadn't expected. He kept second-guessing himself, wondering if he'd been too harsh. He'd check his phone constantly to see if Noreen had texted. He'd suggest maybe we should drive by her apartment to make sure she was okay. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, worried she was struggling and needed help. The guilt came in waves and sometimes pulled him under completely. I reminded him gently each time that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty and that Noreen was a capable adult who needed to build her own life instead of living in his shadow. She'd been perfectly capable of independence for years, but chose dependence because it was easier and gave her control. Letting her face the natural results of her choices, I insisted, was the kindest thing he could do for her long-term growth. Owen listened, but I could see him struggling to believe it. One particularly bad night, he said maybe we should invite her over for dinner, start rebuilding their relationship. I asked him if he thought she was ready for that, or if he was just trying to ease his own guilt. He admitted it was probably the guilt. I suggested we start couples counseling to work through the family dynamics and strengthen our communication skills. Owen agreed immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to suggest it. We found a therapist who specialized in family systems and boundary setting. Our first session was the following week, and it helped more than I expected. Just having a neutral third party validate that Owen's boundaries were healthy and necessary seemed to lift some of the weight off his shoulders. The first project we tackled was the master bedroom. Noreen had chosen the paint color years ago, a dull beige that made everything feel dark and cramped. Owen and I spent a Saturday afternoon at the hardware store, picking out paint samples. We settled on a soft gray blue that made the room feel bigger and brighter. I painted while Owen pulled up the damaged flooring she'd scratched during her final week. We replaced it with new hardwood that matched the rest of the house. We moved the bed to a different wall and brought in a dresser from my old apartment that I'd kept in storage. Owen hung photos of us on vacation and with friends. By the end of the month, walking into that bedroom felt completely different. The space didn't hold any trace of Noreen's anger or the tension that used to fill every corner. Owen started sleeping better. He stopped waking up at random hours, checking his phone for messages from her. I caught him smiling while folding laundry one afternoon and asked what he was thinking about. He said he was just happy to be home. Truly home, for the first time in years. We tackled the living room next. Noreen had arranged all the furniture to face the television she'd monopolized every evening. We moved the couch to create a better conversation area and added a reading chair by the window. I brought in plants, and Owen built shelves for our books. We replaced her heavy, dark curtains with lighter ones that let in more sun. The house started feeling like it belonged to both of us, instead of being Noreen's territory that Owen happened to own. We cooked together in the kitchen without someone hovering and criticizing. We watched movies on the couch without interruptions. We had friends over for dinner without worrying about Noreen making everything awkward. The house felt lighter, calmer, like we could finally breathe properly. 2 months after Noreen moved out, Owen's phone buzzed during breakfast. He read the message, and his face went carefully neutral. He handed me the phone so I could see. Noreen was asking if he wanted to meet for coffee. The text was different from her usual demands. She asked, instead of telling him what to do. She suggested a coffee shop near her apartment instead of expecting him to come to her. She said she understood if he wasn't ready, but she hoped they could talk. Owen looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked. "It's your decision," I told him, "but I wouldn't be upset if you wanted to see her." He texted back, suggesting Thursday afternoon. Owen met Noreen at a small coffee shop across town. I stayed home, trying not to check the clock every 5 minutes. He was gone for almost 2 hours. When he came back, he looked tired but not upset. He sat down at the kitchen table and told me what happened. Noreen apologized. Actually apologized without making excuses or blaming anyone else. She said losing control of his house forced her to look at herself honestly for the first time since her divorce. She'd been using him as a crutch and manipulating him to keep from facing her own life. She said she'd started seeing a therapist who helped her understand how dependent she'd become. She admitted she'd been horrible to me and to him. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted him to know she was working on herself. Owen told her he appreciated the apology, but needed time before they could rebuild any kind of relationship. He made it clear he wouldn't go back to their old dynamic, where she controlled his life. Noreen said she understood. They agreed to have coffee again in a month if Owen felt ready. Wedding planning became easier without Noreen sabotaging everything. We looked at venues without someone criticizing every option. We chose a date in early October when the weather would be nice but not too hot. We booked a small garden venue that held about 80 people. Owen's parents were supportive and helpful. Tabitha even took me shopping for my dress, and we actually had fun together. She told me stories about Owen as a kid that made me love him even more. She apologized again for not seeing Noreen's behavior sooner. She said she and Nolan had enabled both their children in different ways, and they were trying to do better. We invited Noreen to the wedding. Owen wanted to extend the invitation as a gesture of moving forward. I agreed because I could see it mattered to him. Noreen accepted with a text that sounded genuinely happy for us. She didn't ask to be involved in planning or try to insert herself into decisions. Owen and I set clear boundaries about her role. She could attend as a guest, but we weren't asking for her input or help. Tabitha became my main helper with wedding preparations. She had good taste and respected my opinions. She and I grew closer over the months of planning. I started to feel like I had a real relationship with Owen's mother, separate from all the drama with Noreen. Our wedding day arrived on a perfect October afternoon. The garden venue looked beautiful, with fall flowers and warm sunshine. Noreen showed up on time, wearing an appropriate dress. She congratulated us and didn't create any scenes, but I could feel the tension underneath everything. She stood apart from the family during photos. She left the reception early without saying goodbye to everyone. Owen's parents looked sad, even while celebrating with us. I knew they were mourning the family harmony that might never fully return. I was genuinely happy walking down the aisle toward Owen. I meant every word of my vows, but I also knew our family dynamics would never be simple or easy. Noreen would always be Owen's sister. There would always be some level of complicated history and careful boundary management. We'd fought for our relationship and won, but the victory was messy and painful. Standing at the altar, holding Owen's hands, I felt satisfied knowing we'd made it through the hard parts together. We were stronger for everything we'd survived. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It was real. It was earned. Have you ever had to fight for your relationship against forces outside your control, especially family? What would you have done if you were in my shoes, facing someone so determined to break you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.